This is Digging In, a leadership series brought to you by Eagle Center for Leadership President Melissa Hambrick Jackson. This month, Eagle Consulting CEO Dr. Larry Little is joining us each week as we continue exploring what it looks like to cross the line. We invite you to subscribe to our channel and get notifications when new episodes are dropped. Let's pick back up with Melissa and Larry as they discuss what it looks like when each of the components from the above-the-line formula are missing. Let's join them now.
So let's kind of turn it upside down a little bit. Let's talk about when this doesn't happen, when one of these pieces is not solid. What do you do? How do you help to regroup? So let's start with commitment. Okay, so what if you get some head nods that the team is committed, but there's a question mark, or they're suspicious, or they aren't, they're not sure about, really being able to move whatever this is forward. So let's talk about, what if you get the head nod, but you don't get the real buy-in? You get the outward expression of it, but you don't get the inward commitment. What do you do with that? How do you assess that? What do you do with that?
Well, that's what I call the pretend game. Then we're playing the pretend game. And the pretend game is that I'm nodding my head on the inside, but I'm on the outside, and on the inside I'm saying, no, heck no, I'm not doing that. But it's very dangerous. So if you have that pretend game that you're doing on a team, we'll use a team for a moment, it's time just to call time out there and go, okay, the worst thing I could do in that, if I'm trying to lead that meeting with our team and I get head nod, is to pretend like we're all focused, aligned, we all have this alignment, and we truly don't. So if I sense that, and maybe they say yes, and that behavior does not back it up, I have to come back to this and revisit it and say, we don't have alignment. We don't, and just be honest about it. What you do is, when you don't have commitment, you don't pretend like you do. That's the worst thing you can do. And it's the same thing in a relationship. Hey, I thought we had commitment around this. And the way you address that is you start asking questions. Hey, Fred, I thought we had commitment on this priority. Obviously, we haven't gotten commitment from you on this. You're still behaving in a way that we had talked about. Help me to understand where we got off track. Help me to understand why you're not committed to that. So you have to address it.
So you feel like it's really important to address if there's a lack of commitment, and to be able to do that individually, as a group, both?
It depends on the group. It depends on the environment. Many times it's better to go one-on-one, first. However, if you have multiple people who aren't bought in, it's certainly appropriate at times to go, hey, we said this, but as a leadership team, we're not behaving in a way that we said we would. We're not communicating well. We're not truly helping each other without an agenda of our own. Let's deal with that. So it just depends. But the most important thing is to address it. You've got to address it. You got to address it in a home, with a child, with a spouse, with a significant other, because to continue with the pretend game breeds toxicity and resentment and frustration and anger. So, that's one. If you walk through this process and you say, we're going to cross the line, we're going to learn this, then you've got to be willing to have those hard conversations along the way.
Well, these areas give you the verbiage to be able to come back to.
That's right.
It defines commitment. And so, if you feel like that's not there, it gives you a construct to come back to create conversation around. And I think that's so important.
Absolutely.
You've got a place, you've got a spot to come back to and talk about what might be keeping that person from being committed. And through a conversation, you might find out some things that you can help them remove. Some fears, some obstacles, some doubts, some things that really help them be able to further their commitment just through some conversation. So that's a good piece. So let's talk about priorities. What if you can't get aligned? What if, the team thinks, well, we do need 15, we do need, that we got to accomplish all these things. We're being, held accountable to get all these things accomplished. So how do you help people create an opportunity to figure out, how do you get down to the top? How do you do that? What if you don't have that there?
It's very common, because many times in a professional setting, they feel the pressure to we got to do all of these things. We can't just pick 3 to do. So the misconception is that we only do 3. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we prioritize the top. So we have to go back and talk about, look, I understand these are all important, and we've got to keep the plate spinning. I mean, in a business, we've got to keep productivity. We've got to keep, the standards going. We've got to keep quality. We've got to take care of productivity of, a quantity of numbers. So all those things are so important. But what I'm saying is, let's back up and let's pick 2 or 3 that we're going to focus on intentionally, not to the detriment of others, right? But we're going to kind of make those our thing most important thing that we look at, that we pay attention to while we're keeping these other plates spinning. So it's not that we're saying, and as a leader, you have to be able to prioritize if you're going to be successful. You've got to keep the plate. It's just like at home. You can't just stop everything and say, well, let's just go on vacation and we can focus on loving each other and an environment that's fun. And no, you got to keep your home running. You got to keep lunches made. You've got to keep the kids going to school. You got to keep your job going. You've got to take care of health. You got to take care of your parents or whatever. You can't stop the ship. But in the midst of all of that, we're going to create some clarity to say, in the midst of all of that, I'm going to keep coming back to respect. I'm going to keep coming back over here to having hard conversations. My priority is in this area or division of my company, I'm going to really work on how we are communicating with one another. But I still got to do this, and I still have the customers to take care of, and so it's not either. It's not a or, it's an and, right? It's not.
I think this one, the priorities, is where there has to be just so much conversation, so much fleshing out, so that you get people on the same page of what those truly are. And instead of, one person telling another person, one person, setting that for the other person,
right.
That you're really
Great
getting those priorities set as a team so that everybody is able to be aligned. And
So
that can be
yeah.
difficult. I think it can really be difficult.
No, you're so right, because if you just get the head nod, the pretend game occurs again, and they're just going, okay, I'm going to do this so I can move on out of this exercise. You're really causing some incredibly unhealthy and dysfunctional relationships on a team or in a home. It's so good. What you said is, on those priorities, you have to get everybody to agree, and sometimes when they're quiet, that doesn't mean they're agreeing. That just means they're not, they're being apathetic maybe. So you really have to watch that. It's a good word.
So expectations, being able to be aligned on expectations. And let me ask you this. Have you ever had to just stop the conversation, stop the process, stop the strat meeting, stop the family, whatever it is, to be able to pause and come back later and make sure you're picking the conversation up with some fresh energy or some fresh perspective? Give us some thoughts on that.
Yeah, you're so right. In a home, especially, it's fluid. It's got to be a fluid conversation. And a lot of times we don't have half a day to go to an offsite as a family, but we start talking about around the dinner table, what are our expectations? How do we want our culture to look? What do we want a family to be like? And I think that conversation can stop and pick back up, and you really keep going until you kind of create some clarity and some solidity with those expectations. And my thought is on this experience is, let those flow. Doesn't matter how many you come up with, just because we're not worried about prioritizing right now. Let's do the first thing. Let's make sure we all can agree. You find it really is coming to common agreement with each other around what we desire. That's what an expectation is. And boy, sometimes that's hard and sometimes it's not hard, but it really is a great starting place where we can find agreement together, because you always want to start with agreement. So let's all agree on things that we would desire, expectations that we would want.
Yeah, I love how you talked about making it, conversations. A little bit here, a little bit there. I remember some advice that someone gave me one time is, think about these relationships as a sponge, and you're putting just a little bit of water into the sponge at different times. And so the importance of understanding personalities, and someone may not be able to handle a full-on conversation about, let's define these expectations, let's nail these out, and understanding when can you have and continue these informal conversations at work, at lunch, when you're walking somewhere to go to a meeting, or you're these informal meetings at home, when you're in the car and you're taking your kids different places, where can you invite and facilitate and lead some of these conversations and know when to step off the gas sometimes and allow them to sit and ponder to the next moment.
Love the sponge analogy. I think that's amazing. And one of the things I've found to be helpful is to create a runway for those conversations, especially if you're on a professional team or you have a team. Instead of saying, "Hey, we're going to go to an offsite and we're going to nail this out," begin in your weekly team meetings. I want you to think about expectations. What are what is an expectation, but what are our expectations, and begin to kind of have a runway for that, a sponge, like you said, so that when you get to a place where you're ready to move forward with a priority, they've had some time to saturate and think about it. Yeah, that's a great word, Melissa.
So being focused,
Yep.
be aligned, and that focused alignment is so important in being able to cross that line and consistently go back and forth.
Yeah, you got to have it. It's the first step. If we try to go down to the execution below the line without being aligned with each other, it's disastrous and it's burnout and it's frustration. But focused alignment, because it's above the line, it sounds like, oh, these are soft skills. These are easy skills. Go back to data with me for a minute. Data shows that companies with leadership teams who prioritize these above the line skills, some call them soft skills. They're not soft. There's nothing soft or easy about them. But if they make this above the line just as much a priority as they do the below the line goals that we'll talk about later in another time, but if they make those a priority first, they are incredibly more effective. And if you look at the top 50 or so companies in the world, you will see that they spend an enormous amount of resources and time getting focused and aligned together before they execute. And the same thing is true in our homes. If we just let the busyness of everyday life capture us and overwhelm us, we're going to find ourselves running. We're going to find ourselves frustrated. We're going to find ourselves not communicating.
Years will have gone by.
All of a sudden we look up and we wonder, why don't our teenagers, why aren't we, what happened? And why don't they have the behaviors that we perhaps would like for them to have? This is not a sure, this is not saying if you do this, your children are going to be perfect by any means. But building that infrastructure for family health starts with this process of let's get aligned as a family.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So we want to challenge you. We hope that you've been thinking. We hope that you've thought about home. You've thought about work. We hope that you've thought about, what can I do? How can I try some of these pieces? What can it look like in my family time? What can it look like on my team? Me being a part of a team. So we want to challenge you to go and try some things, experiment, and see what can happen. Thank you for today and Cross the Line. And we want to challenge you to go forth and cross the line.
This has been Digging In with host Melissa Hambrick-Jackson and guest Dr. Larry Little. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you return for the next episode as Larry and Melissa discuss the equation for below the line. To learn more about the concepts from this video, you can find Dr. Larry Little's book, Crossing the Line, available to purchase on Amazon and our website, eaglecenterforleadership.com. You can also find the podcast, Crossing the Line with Larry Little, available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or online at eaglecenterforleadership.com. Thank you for watching.